Okay, welcome everybody to Quick to Politic. This is Ernestine. Oh my gosh, decline. This is Ernestine Lyons. I am live here with Mike Detmer, and just a little bit about yourself. Uh, you are a challenger for the congressional seat for the 8th Congressional District. And that comprises Oakland, Livingston, and Ingham counties.
Correct.
Yes, yes. And so tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. I've spent my entire life in the private sector. Worked in the automotive industry for the last 15 years, licensed real estate agent. Before that, worked almost 10 years in the mortgage industry. Just an everyday person, an everyday family. My wife works hard. I work hard. We've got 2 children. And, I'm running for office. I started this journey actually running for state representative in Livingston County. And then that became a congressional run as of last October. Michigan can be an absolute powerhouse. And there's a lot of things that, as I got into the weeds with what our politicians in Lansing were doing, and then in D.C., and there's a lot of things that were wrong that are hurting Michigan. And so I want to see Michigan really rebound. And really now, especially with what's happened with COVID, we've got to double down on that and do some things that are smart to get the people back working again, create more jobs, and bring people back into the state. But it also goes into accountability and accessibility. One of my biggest pet peeves as a voter is a lot of politicians, you hear from them at election time, and then you don't really hear from them once they get into office, and you wonder, what are they doing? So I'm trying to change that narrative. I'm trying to make sure that everybody can know what I'm doing. They know what I think. They know what I'm trying to accomplish. I did put out the contract with Michigan, which is really goes to accountability. So you can see that on my website. It lists all the things that people in this district have said are important to them, with the economy being number one. But I can go through line by line and show the voters, if they decide to send me to Washington, D.C., what exactly their representative is working on. Whatever the failures are, the successes are, it's all going to be laid out. So that's why I'm doing this. It's trying to change this massive disconnect between the voters and their elected officials.
Thank you for that. And this is why I was I was giving Mike a little bit of a background for our viewers out there. I'm an elected official myself, and I ran because I'm not a politician. I'm a person who's really, really active, and I love, spreading new ideas and giving a new perspective, a fresh set of eyes into, old problems. But I'm also a fellow in the Michigan Political Leadership Program. And so that program is all about bringing together conservatives and liberals and Republicans, Democrats, independents, and, everybody who is on every spectrum of the political discourse. And I find that a lot of times we don't necessarily sit down with each other to get the perspectives on why one side thinks the way that it thinks. And, instead it's almost like you're enemies when we all really have a common goal. So I really wanted to lead into your efforts that you led in Lansing with the resistance, sort of, so to speak, the protests against the stay-at-home mandates, and some of the actions that were, and the objectives around that. What were some of the goals? What were some of the main points? Because I think a lot of maybe my viewers want to know, like, well, what were your aims? And I think I was very curious to know as well. Like how can we, what are we fighting against, and how can we open up a discourse where everybody's seeing both sides of the equation, and what were some things you really, really wanted to get out of that mission, and rallying people around this cause?
Well, one thing that we have to be very careful of is that the cure can't be more damaging and harmful than the actual disease. And I don't think there's any question that COVID is a dangerous thing. Nobody's questioning that. But what the issue is that our state is under such severe lockdown that you have a lot of, I'm speaking to business owners on a daily basis that are saying, Mike, what's this going to look like on the other side? We're not going to have a business anymore. People that had jobs with those companies, they're not going to have jobs to go back to. So there has to be a balance. It can't just be, let's lock down the entire state. When you actually look at the numbers of COVID cases, which they're finally starting to come down, Unfortunately, Wayne County was hit very, very hard, but parts of the rest of the state weren't. And so what I've been pushing for is to get the governor to loosen the chains a little bit and open the state back up, especially areas that were the least affected, and then see how it goes. We've got to get the state back moving again. We're facing a major issue that Michigan's going to be bankrupt. And so then what do you do? And we're going to have empty Main Street USA. We can't have that. So what I'm pushing for, and what the real purpose of these rallies are, is to send a message to her and our state legislators, both Democrats and Republicans, that we need to start having serious conversations about getting this state back moving again. If you also look at the numbers across the country in different states that are under less lockdown, less restrictive lockdowns, their numbers, believe it or not, are considerably less as far as the total number of cases and deaths than states that are under much more severe lockdowns like Michigan. We'll get the scholars involved to understand why that is. So that's what the push is about. People are saying, look, we've been under this lockdown now for 2 months, and we've got to get moving again. We've got to start having those discussions about getting the state back reopened again. And we've seen one stay after the other as far as extending this stay-at-home order. If you drive around right now, people are not staying home. I mean, they're over it. Weather's nice, people are getting out. Even Dr. Fauci, if you listen to,
with nicer weather, people do want.
If you listen to the experts on, sure. And if you listen to the experts like Dr. Fauci saying, for God's sake, get outside. People need to get out. So that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, in what way could this have been handled better by the governor? Because in some ways, I think Michigan is kind of becoming singular in this approach of we've had multiple protests in Lansing, and there were even a couple of protesters who went to the governor's residence, and with the armed, the having all of the ammunition and being armed, and I'm just kind of wondering, in some ways, you haven't necessarily seen other states kind of start to approach their state capitals with weapons and with such fervor. And some people have said, like, maybe it's because Gretchen Whitmer is a woman, and that there's something to do with just kind of hearing a woman tell you what to do and not wanting to necessarily listen to that. And there's sort of like this element of, oh, well, let's rebel against this because, we don't necessarily like her or her politics. So do you think this could have been, one, it's a two-part question, how could it have been handled better, the shelter-in-place mandate, from your perspective? And, two, do you think there's any merit to, for example, Governor Cuomo? He's, gained a lot of popularity, and he is on the left, and he hasn't had a lot of New Yorkers who've stormed the Capitol. They're just as frustrated, and their businesses are hurting just as bad, but people haven't, actively resisted his policies. So I'm wondering, what's the dichotomy between the way that he's handled it and other male governors versus Whitmer, and how could, what would have been the policy that, say, maybe a Snyder or an Engler would have handled, this particular crisis had it happened under a different, government?
Sure. Let's go to the first part of that. I've been advocating for the last 2 months that information is key. People are going to they're going to do the things necessary to take care of themselves, their families, their businesses. Just give us the information. And we've seen a lot of information flowing out there from different sides, different perspectives, and it begs a lot of questions. What's real? What's not real? We've heard about cases of COVID being inflated. We've heard backlash from that. Other people saying, no, that's not really going on. So there's a lot of people that are angry, and they're asking the question, gee whiz, what's really going on here? Just give us the facts. So how could it have been handled differently? I would have preferred to have the governor say, look, this is what's going on. This is what we can expect. I would urge you to stay home. If you have a business, I would urge you to take precautions. If you want to require your patrons to wear masks and gloves, fine. Your employees wear masks and gloves, fine. That should have been the approach, because it's going to be hard enough for businesses under the circumstances. Even if everything opens back up tomorrow, it's going to be very difficult for a lot of businesses because people are still very fearful. And so to keep them shut down on top of this, it's devastating. As far as the fact that the governor is a woman versus a man, I don't think it has anything to do with it whatsoever. In fact, I haven't heard anybody say anything about the fact that she's a woman. That's not even a topic of conversation. There's anger there. And people are saying, look, we want to go back to work. Look, our freedoms are being infringed. Loosen up. Give us a little bit of leeway. Give us some slack. And she's not doing that. Instead, what she's doing is she's keeping the stay-at-home order in place. She's having a battle with the legislature over power and who has the authority, instead of actually listening to the people of Michigan who are saying, look, we just want to get our lives back. Let us start doing that. That's where the anger comes in. As far as people coming to these rallies armed, Michigan's a different animal. Michigan is not New York State. And everybody that came to these protests carrying their ARs, they had the legal right to do it in Michigan, and it's their Second Amendment right to do it. Nobody was pointing guns. There was no violence. It was very peaceful. But they were exercising their Second Amendment right to bear arms. And I've heard people say, you know, well, this is inviting a big problem by them coming to these rallies with their firearms. Now it's going to force the hand of the legislature and the governor to start restricting. You know what, if we're afraid to exercise
we're going to ban, you know, having weapons at the Capitol for any reason. And so what do you say to that?
Well, if we fear exercising our constitutional rights because of some kind of a repercussion from the government, then we've already lost them. So I encourage people to assemble, you know, express your First Amendment right. And if you want to bring your firearm, bring your firearm. It's your right to do so. But keep in mind, the Second Amendment is the teeth. That is the one amendment in our Bill of Rights which protects all the others, including the First Amendment. And if you look at the Federalist Papers, if you do some research on the intent behind that with our founders, that's what this is all about. It's a reminder to our elected officials that the people still have the control. The people have the power. And so I think that was the message that was trying to be conveyed by people that were armed.
So to sum up, you're saying that it's anger, and in Michigan, it's a different type of anger because, you know, of just the nature of how we are. Maybe we're more agrarian, we're more rural, and, you know, because maybe in California or New York, they wouldn't have the same, they might be frustrated, but they're a little bit maybe more stable in your estimation. And so therefore, you know, just kind of having guns and different types of weapons, and, you know, that's the response of, it's a uniquely Michigan response, is your take on it?
Well, I don't think it has anything to do with stability or lack thereof, but each state is definitely unique with its population, and Michigan is a unique state. You know, Michigan's the people of Michigan are very proud of their Second Amendment. You know, it's just that demographic. So, and I don't begrudge anybody in any state to express your First and your Second Amendment rights, or any of the amendment rights in your Bill of Rights. But again, Michigan is a unique state, just like every other state.
Well, thank you for that perspective, because that's something that I was curious about, and it's just like, why weapons? Why AR-15s? Why AK-47s on, you know, the steps of the state capitol? But I just want to move along to in a similar vein. You know, I'm looking for, to be fair. Some protesters have kind of expressed a deep financial need to return to work, as you mentioned, and to keep their lights on, a roof over their heads. And with 25 million Americans losing their jobs and have lost their jobs already, you know, we can generally bounce back as an economy, but is it not sort of selfish to be out exposing yourself and, you know, putting others at risk for, you know, potentially deadly virus, you know, just out in droves? And even though there is that sort of mandate to say, you know, let's try to flatten the curve, let's you know, all do our part.
Well, I don't think it's selfish at all. Your First Amendment right to assemble, there's no asterisk at the bottom that says in case of a pandemic, this doesn't apply. It always applies. And so, you know, again, people that assembled for those rallies, and they'll continue to assemble for those rallies, you know what, you assume that risk. But keep in mind too, the freedoms that we're fighting for, a lot of people lost their lives to protect and to preserve. And so were they any less susceptible to harm to do those things? These people that are assembling, all these patriots assembling for these rallies, sure, they assume the risk. And for people that were afraid to do that, they didn't show up. So, that's their choice to do that. There were people that wear masks and gloves at these rallies, others didn't. It's their choice to do that. I haven't seen any spike in any numbers for COVID cases because of these rallies, anywhere in the country for that matter, let alone Michigan. So, and again, keep in mind, these rallies are outside. You're not in confined spaces. You're less susceptible to catch anything. But it has been cold and rainy in Michigan for these rallies the last few, so I think more people were probably more apt to catch hypothermia than they were to catch COVID.
Thank you. And just shifting gears a little bit. So you're running against an incumbent, Alyssa Slotkin, and her platform is very similar to yours, where we care about the American middle class, and we want to bring decency and integrity back to politics. And your slogan is "You Speak Michigan." And then you're also wanting to deliver results to the people and in the 8th Congressional District, and to not, kind of have this resistance to things that are happening in Washington, D.C. Tell us how you differ, and we've explained ways that you're similar, but at the same time, what would be different under your leadership in Congress?
Sure. Well, to start with, I'm actually from Michigan. I've spent most of my life in Michigan. I was born in northern Michigan. I actually started my professional career in the 8th District, met my wife in the 8th District, went to high school and college in the 8th District. We live in the 8th District. We work in the 8th District. Alyssa Slotkin came in from Washington, D.C. after spending most of her life outside of Michigan. So there's the first difference. My approach, though, is I'm all about smaller government, but bringing the power back to the people. And that has everything to do with, that's the main difference. I don't believe that government has all the answers. People do. Private sector, that has the answers. Anytime government puts their hands in anything, it gets messed up. So our approaches are I think the goal might be the same, but the approaches are 180-degree different.
Nice. One of our viewers is saying that you made some very good points there about some of the issues with the protests in Lansing, and also with, I'm assuming also the big government having less versus more, and that approach. Kind of going back a little bit to just one of the main themes that I always want to get out of people, which is why I started this. It was initially going to be a podcast, and then it became a web series where I really want to solve problems of, how can we stop playing politics and become more united as Michiganders? And, when it comes to, everybody being on the same page, how can we improve the economy? How can we, just get small businesses to feel supported? Because this is something across the board. Everybody said there hasn't been enough done for small businesses. They're out here suffering. And, my frustration has been that a lot of big corporations have, gotten some of the PPP and, other small business loans and, just programs that were designated to help out the small guys, the mom and pops. Here in Harper Woods, a lot of our businesses are small businesses. The big box companies left us a long time ago. And so now we're left trying to build that back up. So what is your recommendation as someone who's active in politics and someone who's seeking higher office to how can we bring this all together? What are some ways that we can fix the economy so that everybody has a share? And what is your take on the handling of, helping out small businesses and, getting relief to them in a timely way?
Yeah, great questions. Small business is the backbone, not just of this state, but the entire country. You're talking over 80% of all the jobs come from small businesses. And with the Small Business Administration loans that are out there, a lot of the big, just what you pointed out, a lot of the big box companies got those loans. I spoke to a small retailer, just a mom and pop shop, and they were actually able to get a small loan from the Small Business Administration through their bank. But their problem is that their employees, in order to not have to pay that back, they have to pay their employees. The problem is the employees are making more money on unemployment right now than actually coming back to work. and they don't know if they're even going to be able to stay in business even with that loan because of how hard everything is right now. And that's a real pandemic going across the state with many small businesses that are saying, hey, look, we're just not going to be able to exist unless this thing breaks loose. The little bit of money coming from the federal government, if they can even get it at all, or even if it doesn't even make sense for them to take a loan, what does make sense is to get back open again. So and to answer your question, people have to stop pointing fingers. You agree where you can, you disagree where you must, and you build on what you have. That's how you get things done. So the finger pointing, the nastiness has got to stop. A few months ago, I was invited to go sit down, and I'm a conservative, but I was invited to sit and have a conversation with two very liberal individuals. And we talked about everything. We agreed on almost nothing. But the fact is that we took the time, the three of us sat and had a great conversation, and we understood where each side was coming from. And I think there's some nuggets there that can be expanded upon to move forward for the people. But that's got to be the approach. It's listening is the first thing, and then trying to find the common ground is what's most important.
Of course, I silenced myself. Would you say that Michigan does this better than other? I mean, I feel like across the board, politics have gotten dirtier over the years, and I think that in some ways we're more divided politically than we were when I was a kid growing up, because you had people who would, the same folks in Michigan who would have voted for, George H.W. Bush, then voted for Clinton, or people who would have voted for the Clinton would have voted for H.W. Bush. And I feel like in some ways, when you think about it, I'm an international relations theorist. When you think about the way that the policies were run under both those two particular administrations, it was pretty much the same thing. And it was a realist approach of, trying to realist, but also a approach of trying to cooperate internationally, and some of these things, they were supported by people across the aisle. So would you say that Michigan maybe does a better job of, helping everybody see each other's perspective, or are we just all going in the same direction as a nation with being as divided as we are?
I don't think Michigan is free of that division whatsoever. I think there's a very, very big, deep, hurtful rift in Michigan politically, and it's the same across the country. But we've got to start electing people across the board who will take time to listen and have a conversation. Even if you decide that you don't agree on anything, maybe there's maybe one or two things you agree on, but the 99% of it you don't. That 1% is worth it. And that's the approach that we have to have.
Yeah, and I this is why I encourage people to have these kind of conversations, because I think we are probably polar opposites of each other in some ways. I know I definitely disagree with you about folks with, getting unemployment and maybe not wanting to go back to work. I think folks will always want to work, and they want to feel needed. They want to feel, I know I wouldn't just want to get something for free. I would want to work for it. And so, but you sometimes you'll disagree with folks, but I think it's really important to at least be open to having those conversations, so that you can see that maybe you agree on things that can get you towards the right conversations to move the needle forward, as opposed to, finger pointing, like you were saying. So thank you for that. I'm just going to shift gears back to
Exactly.
And let's see if we had any questions from our audience. We did have Josh Landon from Fox 2 News join briefly, so that's pretty nice. What would be your plan for reopening the state, and what industries first and in what phases? How would, if you were the one who made the decisions, what would that mean to your district, your county, your city? Which items which industries would have precedence over others?
I wouldn't pick a single industry or company. I don't think the government should be in the business of picking winners and losers in a situation like this. I would say open up all industries across the state, but I think we have to start and be very, very careful. Let's get things back open again, with the caveat that it would be strongly urged that businesses take precautions, at least for the time being. But let's back up just for a second. Let's take a look at what the governor's doing right now. We've gone from a conversation from flattening the curve to trying to prevent a relapse. Well, the relapse hasn't happened. So that approach, she's got 6 phases right now. We don't know when any of those, I think we're in phase 3 at last check. We don't know when phase 6 is going to happen. So that's what people are really upset about. When can we get back going again? I would say open the state back up, but take it, let's take a cautious approach. If things blow out of hand, which I don't think they will or would, then maybe you back it off a little bit. But let's get everybody back open again. Let's get this. The sooner we can do that, the better it's going to be, because it's going to take a long time to get this state and really the country on the rebound and the mend. Even if we open things up today, it's going to take a long time.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I think now this is going to be our last question. So you sort of addressed this, and I'm just shifting gears back to leading the resistance against the stay-at-home orders. Some of the anti quarantine protests that have posted links and images on Facebook saying that this isn't as serious as it is, or maybe that coronavirus is a hoax, and downplaying the seriousness of the virus. Why do you think this sentiment is happening, and what would you say to address that particular claim that people are saying, oh, this isn't real and it was invented, and that even kind of conspiracy theories that China invented this, and that it's a weaponized sort of thing that didn't happen naturally, and that it's there's so many different conspiracies. What do you say to address those particular issues?
If you spend enough time online, you're going to find all kinds of conspiracy theories and rabbit holes to fall into. So time will tell how this all started. Hopefully we'll find the truth. Right now, we just have to deal with what we've got on the ground. I don't think that there's any doubt that the COVID virus is a serious virus. Is it as serious as what some of the projections had initially thought? It doesn't look that way. Doesn't mean it's not nasty. It is. But you've got different sets of figures coming in from different places, which is causing a lot of confusion. I think that's probably what's causing a lot of people to say, maybe this isn't so bad. Is it as bad as the flu? Is it not? That's what we're looking for. And that's the facts. That's the information that people want. They just want the truth. And so far, the hardcore truth has eluded all of us. You've got one group saying, no, this is the worst thing since the plague. And you have other groups that say, this is no worse than the common cold. You'd have to ask the actual virologists those questions and get solid answers. I think most of them would agree that this is a pretty nasty bug. But again, thank God, the projections aren't as severe, or what's actually happening aren't as severe as what the projections initially stated. Now, some can say, well, they're not as bad because of the stay-at-home orders. But if you look at other states that have not had as restrictive executive orders placed on the people, the cases in a lot of states are a lot lower than Michigan. So those are questions that we're going to probably spend the next few years answering.
Definitely, I definitely have to agree that this is uncharted territory. These are waters that we've never been in, and 100 years ago, not even our grandparents actually remember many of these particular things. The 1918 flu pandemic is the closest that we in modern times can get to experiencing something so new and so wide scale. So thank you very much for addressing not only just the response to the coronavirus, and but also talking about the political issues that can bridge us, can divide us, and thank you very much for coming on our show. I've actually enjoyed immensely talking with you and getting your perspective, because in some ways I'm like, I don't even know why so-and-so is doing what they are, but it's like, unless you sit down with somebody to really ask, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And why do you think that way? Then you'll just always wonder and never really have any sense of, exploration or understanding of another person's perspective. So I really want to thank you for coming on Quick to Politic, and thank you so much for being the guest here. I wish you luck in your endeavors. Tell us more about, are there any other things that you have in as far as campaigning, and what is campaigning going to be like for you in the in the times that we live in? So yes, are there any other things you'd like to share with my audience here?
Just that people need to stay strong. You know, I like to say I live in faith, but not in fear. And that's what we have to cling to. Well, I don't care what party you're with or what your faith is, what your political denomination is. We just have to keep moving forward. And we've got to stop trying to demonize people that we don't agree with. You know, I've seen, just like these protesters, I've seen the media try to label them as racist or anything else. And that is the farthest thing from the truth. These are just people that are angry, that want to get the state back open again. And by the way, there were a lot of Democrats, independents, and Republicans at these rallies, and it'll continue to be that way because the common cause here is getting life back together again. I don't think a lot of people want a new normal. They want to get back to the old normal, and the time to start that is now. As far as campaigning, campaigning as usual. We're in uncharted territory here, so we just do the best we can and try to reach as many people as possible with the means that we have. So I think that's true with all the campaigns at this point.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for those who joined us live.